Hey guys, so if you are familiar with me, my techniques that I like to use to apply makeup, or maybe you've seen a couple of my popular videos here on YouTube, then you might already know this, but I'm obsessed with the Beauty Blender. I love the Beauty Blender sponge. I love using it on myself. I use it on my clients. I think it's an amazing tool. It works really well to blend out your foundations, concealers. I particularly love it for blending out concealer on the under eye area. I use this to highlight, to contour. I'll even use this to press in my loose powders for baking. So I feel like the Beauty Blender is one of the most diverse, usable, user-friendly, must-have tools in the beauty industry. And this is something that I am obsessed with, and I recommend 1,000%. It actually took me a really long time to get on board with this. Back when I was working at Sephora, this came out and people would come in and be like, why is this sponge $20? And I'd be like, I don't know. And I didn't really sell it. And then I got it in gratis and I was obsessed after that. This was years ago, but ever since then I've been addicted to them. I totally feel like they're worth the $20, but let's be real, who wants to spend $20 on a sponge? I used to actually get so mad at customers at Sephora when they would be like, ugh, it's $20 for a sponge. You can just go get one for $5 at Walmart. And I would get so cringed inside, and I'm like, it's not the same thing. People would talk about those little disposable sponges, the little sponges like this, and the little wedged ones. And sure, those are great, but they're not the same thing. So I would get so annoyed when customers would be like, ugh, why is that $20? And I'm like, because it is. I was like, because it's so good. And I still stand by that. The Beauty Blender is a patented non-latex, non-porous sponge. I love these. But if you can get away with spending less money on a sponge, why not do that? So the first tool that I came across that was a good dupe, in my opinion, is the Real Techniques sponge. Mine are so dirty, sorry guys. But I love this sponge. I will leave a link in the description box down below to one of my popular videos on YouTube, which is the Real Techniques sponge versus the Beauty Blender. It's kind of an old video, but in that video, I absolutely fell in love with the Real Techniques sponge. There was a moment when I was like, oh my gosh, this might even be better than the Beauty Blender, which now that I've used both of them a million times, I will say I still like the Beauty Blender better, but I love the sponge. I think it's well worth the money. I think this is a great alternative. And if you're someone who does clients makeup, so you need something that you can sanitize and toss and get new ones, then I think that's a great option. Or if you just want to save money, then it's a good option. So I love both of these, but recently a new sponge has come out, and I've heard amazing things about the sponge, so I wanted to put it to the test myself. This is the Ecotools Sponge. I mentioned this in a haul and y'all were like, yes, do a video, talk about it. It's been a while, so I'm finally doing this. But this is the Ecotools sponge. So it comes in a duo with two sponges. They're identical sponges. They're just a little different color and different sizes. I believe that the actual formula of these is the same though. They look and feel exactly the same. I bought my duo at Target for $9.99, but I was just looking on Target.com on my phone, and it said the sponge is only $6.99. So I'm not sure how much these retail for. It probably depends where you buy them, but they're definitely under $10. So today I want to use this sponge to apply my makeup, and I want to kind of compare it with the Beauty Blender. Maybe I'll compare it a little bit with the Real Techniques sponge, and let's see if these Ecotools are a good dupe. I want to see if these are as good or if they're better. And I'm very excited to put them to the test. So if you look at a little sponge, you'll see that it has that almost egg shape. You do have the round section down here at the bottom, which is what you get with the Beauty Blender down at the bottom. And then on top, it doesn't come to a point, it comes to an angle. This side is a little shorter of an angle, and then this side is a deeper angle. So I feel like I would actually use this side for foundation, maybe this side for foundation, and then, I don't know, maybe that for concealer. I really like the Beauty Blender for using the big side for foundation, the small side for concealer underneath the eyes, and then on the Real Techniques sponge, I always use the flat side, the big flat one for foundation, and the pointed side for concealer. So I definitely think I'll end up using this side for foundation. I'm just not sure where I'm gonna do concealer, but let's go get it wet and see what happens. So now that I've dampened all my sponges, you can see that the Ecotools one is ginormous. This is so big. It is bigger than the beauty blender, but it just looks and feels a lot bigger to me, and it's definitely bigger than the Real Techniques sponge as well. But I will say it's super soft. The Real Techniques is a little softer. I mentioned that in my Real Techniques review, that the Real Techniques one is actually softer than the beauty blender, which is interesting. When these are both dry, the Ecotools is a lot more dense. It's a lot harder than the beauty blender. Like, it is a much stiffer sponge, but once it's dampened, it's extra soft. Feels very similar, like very similar texture. Actually, probably more similar texture than the Real Techniques one. And then the smaller one is a little more dense. I don't know if that's like a size thing, but the smaller one does feel a little bit harder than the large one, which the other beauty blenders do that too. I have some of the micro mini beauty blenders, and these ones are a little bit more dense. And then the blush beauty blender, which is like in between these sizes, that one's a little harder too. So maybe it's like a size thing, but I'm so excited. So first I'm gonna start off with my beauty blender. I'm familiar with how this applies, so I feel like, I mean, you guys don't really need a tutorial or demo on how this applies to the skin, because you guys have seen the beauty blender a million times. But I'm gonna do this whole side of my face with the beauty blender, and then I'm gonna switch to the Ecotools on the other side. Okay, so the beauty blender side is finished. Let's switch to the Ecotools. This is like a first impressions, but I'm so excited. I'm gonna go ahead and pump some on this big flat side, not the short one, but the big one. And let's have at it. This feels so big. Like, I feel like I'm hitting myself with a big ol' sponge. I will say, I can already tell that this sponge absorbs a lot more product than the beauty blender does. More product went further with a smaller section on the beauty blender side than this. I already feel like this sponge has absorbed a big old chunk of the foundation, and I'm out. Like, there's no more foundation on this sponge anymore. It's already all been deposited. So that's definitely not a good sign. I don't like when tools or products eat up your other products, because I don't want to have to repurchase or replenish my products frequently. I definitely want to make my money last longer, especially if you're using high-end products. Like with my Maybelline foundation, it's not the end of the world, but if I was using like my YSL foundation or something, I would not like that it takes more product to get the same results with this sponge. But so far it feels nice. It does feel a little more dense than my beauty blender. I will say that. This feels like harder. Like, I definitely feel more aggressive on my face. Not that it like hurts or anything, but it is a more dense sponge. Okay, so I have a light layer of foundation on both sides of my face. I will say that I did have to go in and apply more product on this side of my face more frequently. So less product went less far on this side, whereas less product went more far on this side. I do feel like I had to build up more product to get more coverage on this side, whereas this side, it just like built up coverage really quick, really easy. And I like the size of this because it does cover a larger surface area, I feel. Maybe if I use this side, I guess it's not that different, but this side does feel bigger, and I feel like I can cover more surface area, so I'd be able to work quicker. However, because I have to keep reapplying more product on this side because the sponge is absorbing the product, it doesn't really end up actually being faster. Like in theory, with it being larger on this side should go quicker, but it doesn't because I have to keep reapplying product. So I'm gonna go in with my Real Techniques sponge just to kind of refresh my memory on this sponge. So yeah, this one is definitely softer, just like I remember, and I do feel like I get more coverage quicker with this, so it doesn't absorb as much product. I don't know if maybe with my Beauty Blender and my Real Techniques sponge being more like broken in, like I've used both of these sponges multiple times, so maybe they're like a little more broken in than the Ecotools one, but I don't think so. I don't think that's a factor. I just think that this absorbs more product than these do. Okay, so now that my foundation is applied, I want to go in and try concealer and see how these sponges differ with concealer application. I'm going to apply some underneath this eye. I got so much criticism actually in my Real Techniques tutorial or my Real Techniques review, which wasn't as well done as I feel like my newer videos are because it is a little older, but people got so mad at me about my concealer application in that video. So if we could try to not do that in this video, that would be great. Okay. So I feel like that applied awesome. I'm very used to applying under eye concealer with my Beauty Blender, but I love the way that it applies. I think it looks very smooth. I think that it builds up coverage well. I do feel like sponges in general tend to thin out product a little bit. You are adding a little bit of moisture, a little bit of like water to the formula. So think of it as like if you add water to any product, you would be thinning out the actual formulation of the product because water is obviously just going to be like a filler ingredient. So I feel like that's a little normal. Anytime that I apply concealer with a sponge, a damp sponge that is, I always apply a little extra concealer than I would if I was just using like a brush or my fingers, because it does take away a tiny bit. So keep that in mind. If you're doing concealer with a sponge, you may need to apply a little more product than you normally would, but I think that looks awesome. So let's try the Ecotools on this side. So I'm gonna go in, should I use the short side? See, I feel like the shape is weird. Let's see. It's not bad for this like outer section here. It's right here where I don't know, I could do it this direction, but it just feels a little odd. I don't find this as fitting as my pointed tools do. Okay, so maybe it's in my head, but I do think that I got more coverage on this side. I do feel like this looks more smooth than this side does. I feel like it took away some of the coverage, like down here. I feel like it doesn't look as good as this side does. Do you guys see that? Is that in my head? Am I crazy? Let's try going in with the smaller one and see if that makes a difference. I have heard people say that they like the smaller one better. Just gonna layer on a little more concealer. I feel like this one's harder. Like, I feel like I'm hitting my face. Like, that doesn't look comfortable, does it? Okay. So now I feel like I have the same amount of coverage on both sides. Do you guys feel that way? So this side is Ecotools and this side is Beauty Blender. What do you think? So now that my makeup is complete, I have some final thoughts to share with y'all. Like most products, I think that this tool has pros and cons. I think that this does apply makeup well. I just don't like that it does absorb an amount of product in here. I do feel like I have to use more product when I use these tools than I do with other sponges, and that is a significant con in my book. These are significantly more cost effective than your Beauty Blender. So if you want to take the amount of product, like the price per ounce of product that you would have to use more of on this sponge versus spending $10, $15 more on this sponge, you can kind of weigh that out and see what matters more to you. I do like this sponge. I will continue to use it. It is something that will get the job done. It just takes a little bit more time than something like the Beauty Blender does. After using both of these tools, first impressions, I will tell you guys, I like my Real Techniques sponge better. I like that this is softer, and I think that this just overall applies my makeup better than the Ecotools one does. One of the biggest cons on this as well for me is I don't like the way it is underneath the eyes. I just don't find that this shape is practical for blending out concealer. I don't always use a beauty blender or a sponge to do my foundation. I will use brushes from time to time, but I almost always have to use a sponge for my under eye concealer. So I need to have a sponge that will work in that area because that's the primary use that I use a sponge for. So to me, these just don't fit that area of my face. Now, everyone has a different face shape, so maybe you find that this shape does fit your under eye area well. For my particular face shape, it doesn't. And I just don't find that this is as ergonomic under there as either of these two tools are. I do think that this would be really good for baking. If you do any sort of sculpting, baking, contouring, the Cake and Bake sponge from Sephora is really popular, where you will take your product and bake it underneath your jawline to help sculpt out a really harsh contour. I think this product would be amazing at that. I think this would do so, so good. I can tell that with that like edge that it would just be like the perfect product for pressing in powder. And this is significantly less than the Veramona Cake and Bake sponge. So I do think that there are benefits to this sponge, but if you're gonna go out and choose which sponge to spend your money on, this is not my #1 recommendation. I know that a lot of people here on the internet have been raving and loving this sponge. So maybe don't take it from me, maybe try it out for yourself or see somebody else's review, but in my personal opinion, I do not love this one. I would highly recommend the Real Techniques one or the Beauty Blender itself. Thank you so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed this kind of demo, first impression, review style. I think this is a lot of fun and I really enjoy making these types of videos for you. Please give me a thumbs up if you guys want to see more sponge related videos. I have a ton of different sponges that I want to test out and review for y'all, so please let me know if that's something that y'all are interested in, and let me know in the comments down below what sponges you guys have tried. I want to know if there's a sponge out there that I need to try, if there's something you hate, something you love. I would love to talk to y'all about that. And if you guys enjoy me and enjoy these kind of videos, please subscribe. I would love to have you as a part of my YouTube family, and I really appreciate all of your support. Thanks guys, and I'll see y'all later. Mwah.